traveler's wife is still battling the issue of Henry visiting Claire when she was 6 and kind of molding her into the woman she is. With us getting to know Henry a little bit better in this episode, you can kind of start having evidence, facts, information, whatever you want to call it, that you need in order to start kind of backing away from the issue that is him jumping back in the past and spending so much time with this girl for reasons that in this episode we finally can kind of understand why. So to summarize this episode, Henry and Claire are still in this weird place when it comes to each other. 20-year-old Claire, 28-year-old Henry, they still can't see eye to eye, but at the same time, there's this recognition that fate has brought them together and they're going to be stuck together. But that's kind of a problem for both people. When it comes to Claire, she's kind of like, I don't want to have to wait all this time in order to have you as I want you. I'd rather kind of look into something else, but the way Henry makes it seem, he has tried many times to change fate in the timeline and it has never worked out. So in a way, he's kind of tapped out when it comes to whoever he's dating and however that's going to go. And he's coming to the point of committing to Claire, but she's still very much in love with the idea of him, or at least the idea of who he's going to become, but dealing with this current guy is like, ugh. But one of the benefits of the date that they have when she tries to change up where they're supposed to go, it's that it's finally the day where she's going to find out what happened to Henry's mom, which is something that when she was 6 and she asked the older Henry about, he said that she would have to wait until some specific events come and everything has now come into play. So, to make a long story short, Henry has the ability to go into the past, and he can go all the way up into where his parents met, and he may even played a part in his parents' meeting. But one thing that he can't do is save somebody. Specifically, he can't save his mother, who was decapitated when he was 8 years old. And to make matters worse, when it comes to Henry's power, he time jumps based off of strong emotions, and he goes to where that strong emotion was or is. Hence why when it comes to Claire, he jumps back to when she was 6, perhaps because that was a time that she often spoken about in her life, or else it could be that with him jumping in time, he jumps to what's familiar. And even though it's not necessarily clear if Henry ever went to where Claire grew up, long story short is he emotionally time jumps to wherever he not necessarily needs to be, wherever he feels most connected to at the time, mentally and emotionally. So when it comes to his mom's death, that's a place where it seems like all ages of him end up going to sometimes at the same time. Because his mom getting decapitated is not only something that causes him to have a scar on his head, but also is probably the most traumatic experience of his life, to the point that he now doesn't keep any of his mom's things in his apartment. Instead, he hides them in a library to visit on occasion when he feels stable enough to handle it. But in an effort to get to know Claire better and, bond with her, he talks about this, and he even goes so far as to show how deeply entwined their fate is by playing her a tape of his mom singing. And on top of that, he asks of Claire what question would she ask his mom if she had the chance, even though she's been long dead. And of course, at first she thinks this is the game, it's a little bit much, but then she actually answers the question, and with that, he plays a recording of his mom doing a Q&A after she sings, because his mom, Annette, was an opera singer. And she answers the question because it seems older Henry set up so that Annette could answer that question for Claire at a later time. It's a very cute and romantic moment, but at the same time, it's so tear-inducing. But with him doing all that, so comes the question of how's his relationship with his dad, and right now it seems that they're estranged. Now, on a good note, his dad does know that his son does time jump. Granted, it's because he caught his son doing stuff to himself, but Richard, Henry's dad, does know his son time jump, and he's actually alive. Now, as for what happened to him, especially after Annette died, that's not really clear. All we know is that Richard was a violinist. He may have guilt because Annette was on his way. Annette was on her way to pick him up from the airport when she died, and now he has this son who has the ability to go see his mom wherever he can, but Richard is stuck, unable to see his wife. So maybe there's some animosity there. It's rather hard to say, but believe me when I say that when it comes to Henry, he has tried multiple times to try to fix the timeline. I think at this point, when it comes to his mom's death, or maybe even his relationship with Richard, he's accepted what happened, and that's why he probably, both as an older man and as who he is now, has clung on to Claire so much, because he knows of all the terrible things that's going to happen to his life, and as he said, because of that, he clings on to Claire because that's the only guaranteed good thing that's going to be consistent throughout all his years. When it comes to highlight, there's really only one highlight, and that's just because this episode was tear-inducing. I think this episode really pushes you to kind of get past the whole idea that Henry was grooming Claire, because now you know that he has no control of his powers. He goes back to when Claire is 6 because for whatever reason he needs to see Claire. He has some type of memory, or at least maybe some story that she told that kind of had an effect on him, and so he goes sees that girl. Now, we're not told Claire's side of the story, so we're not sure what her life was like with her siblings, her parents, and maybe what kind of trauma she might have gone through, which led to him going to that 6-year-old and perhaps being kind of like the silver lining of her life at the time. But in this episode, we do get to see everything that Henry gone through in between, seeing an 8-year-old version of him deal with his mother dying and unable to save her. I'm sorry, it's just like, it's one of those topics where for a lot of shows, I think it's, especially in this day and age, you kind of forget that it's not just about quantity anymore. It's some of networks really do care about quality, and as much as you can see this as a potentially sappy show, especially because it deals with someone's mom dying, him opening up to this girl who he barely knows but apparently is going to marry and fall in love with, you can see, like, if it was any other network, that this could be very corny, sappy, and, you know, kind of cheap in terms of pulling on your heartstrings. But the way that this episode was handled in terms of Henry's relationship with Annette and him trying to deal with accepting that she's going to die no matter what he does, whether he's 8 years old, 20-something, 30, 40 maybe, it's hard to not kind of hit you in the gut a little bit. And then when it comes to him bonding with Claire in the process, it doesn't take away from him basically cheating on whoever he's with, because even though he's not physically cheating at this, well, he did sleep with Claire, so he did physically cheat, but now he's emotionally cheating as well. A part of you kind of forgets that as he opens up to her, and you can see that Claire's very receptive of it. Rose Leslie, when she's interacting with Theo James, is having an intimate moment that makes you somewhat forget that they're actors. I mean, you don't fully forget because it's plain as day, but at the same time, it's one of these rare cases where you could actually get lost in the moment rather than kind of having it in your head where these are two actors going back and forth, going off of a script, but instead now it feels like it's an actual moment that these two are sharing, that while you're not thinking that, oh, these two actors should date or whatever, because I think both are married at this point. I know Rose Leslie is married to the dude who played Jon Snow. I don't know if Theo James is married, but to get off of the tangent that I'm possibly going on, long story short, this was an emotional experience that I was not expecting, and I do hope that this is what we should expect, and not just because this is on HBO, which of course should be held to a higher standard because they care more about quality and quantity, but when it comes to just this show in general, that it's only going to get better from here, and that this is just the appetizer before the full meal comes out. Which leads to our overall thoughts, which is, yes, the first episode had a bit of a rocky start because you had to kind of figure a way to at least tolerate the idea of Henry interacting with this 6-year-old and possibly grooming her, but Now that we understand that fate is really trying to push these two together, no matter what age they are, which is still kind of weird to be honest. But I think that with the way that the show is trying to craft that, it's trying to chip away at what makes that weird or uncomfortable. And being that this is under the HBO umbrella, it's really trying to get to the heart of the situation and the emotion of it so that you can kind of get past the physical of it, which is perhaps one of the main sticking points if you could have any type of issue with this show.